vulnerability gives the other person the chance to be a hero in your life and expands your sphere.
I think one of the most meaningful, impactful things that was said to me was, just because you did something bad doesn't erase all the good things you've done in the past.
But it's from listening to all these people sharing me these stories and wanting more of that. Like, I want more of that in my life. I want my heart to expand. I want to do more. I want to love better.
Welcome to the Rethreading Lives podcast, where we talk about how to take your threads of harm and through the rethreaded process, transform them into something that actually helps you reach your potential. We'll talk with different leaders in our city and our country and find out what they're doing. You'll walk away from listening to this podcast with useful insights and captivating stories on how you yourself can rethread your life and your business. I'm Kristin Keen, and this is the Rethreading Lives podcast.
So welcome to today's podcast. Jason and I are excited to host our guest today, Mark the King Tumeo. I know Mark because we were in Leadership Jacksonville together, and we were class of 16, the best class ever, also the most extroverted class in the history of Leadership Jacksonville, and also the nicest, according to Leadership Jacksonville. We were a very nice class. And Mark was, interesting fact about Mark is that we voted on the king and queen of Leadership Jacksonville class of 16, and Mark was our king. A well-deserved honor. But Mark is in the top 3 smartest people that I know. He is an engineer by trade, but also became a lawyer and is a doctor of something engineering, has been a professor, has started a nonprofit, ran a nonprofit, is an activist in our community. He is a flipper of houses, married. Do you have any pets, Mark?
We did. Milo has since crossed the rainbow bridge.
Okay.
Made it past 17.
Wow.
He had a very good life, and he graced us for a long time.
Awesome. And Mark has also been an advocate for Rethreaded. He makes sure Leadership Jacksonville class of 16 is always represented at Mukti. He has been involved in our housing initiative. And yeah, do you have anything to add about Mark?
And he's got a heart of gold.
And a heart of gold.
Been a big resource for us, as we try and work through the difficult world of housing. And I know a lot of people listening understand what Jacksonville and housing means, but certainly for the ladies that are coming through Rethreaded, housing's a big obstacle. And he's been a big help in us navigating that, which is appreciated. And it's just been in our corner for a long time. So it's exciting. Renaissance man.
A Renaissance
You
man.
left out politician.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Andy was a politician.
Well, was maybe a little strong.
You held a public office.
No, that doesn't mean I'm not going to again.
No.
Is this really why you're on the podcast?
Oh, he's launching his campaign. You heard it here.
I figure I couldn't be any worse than many of the people already running.
So why don't you give us a little glimpse into your life now? What does it look like now? Where are you at?
Well, right now I'm in private practice engineering. I do fire protection engineering, which is something new in the past 5 years. My main training has been environmental. There's a lot of connection between the two. How heat moves and contaminants move in the environment is very much what fire is about. We just had to learn a little bit more about how fire burns. There's a lot of chemistry, which is my minor. So that's good.
Your minor? Okay.
Yeah. Well, I went to a traditional PhD where you had to have a major, 2 minors, and a foreign language, and computing was not a foreign language. So
what was your foreign language?
German.
Wow. Zwei. That's
Ich habe in Wien gewohnt.
I'm not even going to acknowledge that because I don't know what I'm agreeing to.
So
I just want to say, I know your current employer Um,
Steve was also in our Leadership
Jacksonville. And we were talking about you the last time I saw him. And he's just like, he gets real quiet. And he's like, he's so smart.
I try and explain I'm not really smart. I'm just very persistent.
Maybe that's great. That's good. Okay.
I'm actually kind of slow in some areas.
Yeah, we all are. We all ever.
But so I'm doing that. I'm on the downhill slope to retirement. Looking forward to a lot more travel. But Steve brought me into the fire protection engineering area, and I'm very excited about that. And then his small company was purchased by a large company, Vertex, and they have put me in a position where I am the director of learning, development, and implementation. So I'm doing a lot more teaching, which I love. That really is my passion. And developing relationships with universities, developing programs. So I'm pretty happy right now, just kind of cruising along for a while until I start traveling the world again.
And that's kind of a full circle moment.
Yeah.
Because it's the engineering, it's the teaching, and now it's all coming together where you're able to take all those years of experience into this one moment, which is kind of neat.
It's I can't complain. I've had a very non-linear career, as they would say, but it's been very good, and it's given me a lot of opportunities to do a lot of very different and interesting and things that have helped me grow a great deal.
So why don't you kind of walk us through this? Not everything in your life, because it's only like a.
You only have an hour and a half.
Only an hour and a half podcast, but maybe the highlights of some of the stuff you've accomplished in your life.
Oh, this is the second time today I've been asked that question. I think one of the, besides getting an education and all those kind of things, I think one of the things I'm most proud of is having started the Interior AIDS Association with 7 other people. No one does these kind of things on their own. That organization's still going. We started, a young man did a drag show and made $62, and that's what we started the organization with.
Yes. And you were in Alaska. Alaska?
Yeah, Fairbanks, Alaska. Is the Interior AIDS Association. It was the first AIDS association in the interior of Alaska, which is about the size of the United States from Maine down to New York and over to Indiana.
Wow.
So it's a big area. Alaska is a big state. We often threatened that if Texas didn't calm down, we'd split in half and make them the 3rd largest state in the
Union.
That's so good.
So what can I say? Alaska, Texas, we have that thing going on. So that was really, it was something that was needed. So we started this organization, and the 7 of us took that to about a $400,000 a year budget before we hired an executive director and kind of turned that running over. But that was I liked that a lot. Being elected to city council in Cleveland Heights, Ohio was quite an honor. Being reelected was even more of an honor. So that's a big thing. Having been dean of the College of Computing, Engineering, and Construction, did a lot of good things for the students there, I think, and for the university. Had the great honor of working with John Delaney. He was president at the time. Learned an awful lot about leadership from him and how to be a respected leader. I think in general, they're good things. Probably the other thing I'm most proud of is actually got lucky enough to find someone who would stay with me for 20 years. We just celebrated our 20-year anniversary.
You did? What'd you do?
We went out to dinner. So, yeah.
Valid. At what point you were already an engineer, and then at what point did you become a lawyer?
That was in the late 1990s. It's kind of a funny story. I was working under a fellowship as the technical advisor to the U.S. Department of Agriculture secretary. And we were converting the Joliet Army ammunition base into the Medewan Tallgrass Prairie. It had been designated by Congress to be moved over to the department for a park, a prairie. And they had used arsenic as a pesticide, which was quite common. but now isn't. And then there was contamination in the soil. Before the transfer occurred, the Army and the US EPA had come together with a record of decision on cleanup levels, which is the process when you're cleaning up a surplus site, a Superfund. They had established a level for arsenic that would have been okay if you weren't going to use this as a prairie in a park. And so the Forest Service, which is part of the USDA, said those arsenic levels are not adequate. So there was this disagreement. And when you're one federal agency, you can't sue another federal agency. So we ended up at the Office of Management and Budget at the White House with the Secretary of Agriculture and the Forest Service and the EPA and the Army all there with the OMB director discussing how we were going to resolve this. And I did a technical presentation on the arsenic and its dangers, but I had also taught about CERCLA to my engineers and about how law controlled what we had to do. And there's a part of the law that's a little bit, if you've applied something as a valid legal pesticide, it doesn't fall under CERCLA unless there's a health and safety exemption. And so there's, it's a little bit complex. So I presented the technical stuff, and I had told the USDA lawyer that there was going to be a rebuttal from the Army that this doesn't fall under CERCLA. And the answer that I thought was the right answer was, well, it's a health and safety matter, so it does come back in. So I give my presentation and I sit down, and of course the attorney for the Army presents this doesn't count because, and I leaned forward to say something because I had just done the presentation. And the lawyer put her hand on my arm and said, "You're not allowed to talk because you're not a lawyer." And at that moment I said, if I need 2 more letters behind my name to be able to state my opinion, I'm going to law school. That was in July. I was in law school in September.
Nuh-uh. Mm-hmm. And then you did you work full time and then go to law school?
Yeah, at night.
Just a casual night law school.
I'm bored.
It was not casual.
I better go to law school.
But
oh my gosh.
It was actually, law school at night is not like Paper Chase and all those, movies where you're in competition. We formed a group. There was about 6 of us, and we made sure each other got through.
Community.
Yeah, it was.
It's like the rethreaded process whenever I
Yeah,
hear your story.
It was a community for sure.
And was this in Alaska as well?
No, that was in Cleveland.
Okay. That's where eventually you ran for city council.
Yes. Cleveland Heights is where we lived.
Okay.
The school was in Cleveland. It's Cleveland State University.
Okay. All right. I don't know if I would ever become a lawyer to use my voice.
I don't know if it needs to stay in the podcast, but how do you clean up arsenic?
You either have to remove it. If it's in soil, you can dilute it so you can add clean soil, because below a certain level, it isn't a problem. Or you have to, there's other more complicated and difficult methods. You can encapsulate it. If it's in water, you can filter it out. But it doesn't decay. It's a metal.
So there's no way to get rid of it. Like you remove the soil, you're just taking tainted soil and tainting some other place. There's no way to burn it or anything that eliminates it.
It's an element. It doesn't go anywhere. If you're an alchemist, you might be able to turn it into gold, but we haven't figured that one out.
It's an element, so it doesn't go away.
Right. It's a base unit.
There's a sermon in there somewhere.
Not all elements are like that.
Really?
If you're radioactive, you actually change yourself. You decay. Like uranium decays. Radon decays. You look started.
No, I wish I took chemistry, and I took organic chemistry.
Yeah.
Anyways, I digress. Okay, so today, what I would like to talk with you about is we have our rethreaded process here. For those of you listening, we have the sphere in our hand, one of those spheres that kind of collapses in on itself and goes in and out. What is the official name of this?
Ask the engineer. It's a helix sphere.
It's not a helix.
Whatever.
It's a collapsible sphere. That's all I would say.
It's a collapsible sphere.
There you go.
And the elements of
the rethreaded process or time, which is the ability to sit with your thread. It's your currency to heal. Purpose, why you're here. Vision, the belief that things can change. Community, which is the people that help us, encourage us, and hold us accountable. And then openness. And no openness we've been defining as the willingness to be honest and vulnerable. And we've been talking about honesty is being honest with yourself. So being willing to look at your thread. And then vulnerability is is when you let other people see you. And we live in a world that I feel like is not open.
Mm-hmm.
If I was to give how I feel like the United States is right now, I feel like we're probably about here. Like there's like these pockets of openness with people that when everyone agrees, everyone can be like really open. But then I feel like as a whole, our ability to tolerate other difference of opinions and hold difference of opinions is more around this level. So I want to start it there. I don't know if that's a positive place, but I find it difficult in this world a lot to have a difference of opinion than anyone and not be demonized or cut off or ostracized if you don't believe the same way as someone.
That's true.
Yes.
I think part of the thought process when I hear you describe that specific problem is not it's not openness. It's fear of being wrong. So people don't like, we've built our world around our own belief systems. And when someone says, well, I don't agree with that belief system, it's a personal attack, or it can be taken that way.
Mm.
And so, biologically, we are social animals and we want to belong to a tribe. That's the way we survived. That's the way we managed to overpopulate the earth to the way we have. We have groups. We protect ourselves from others who aren't part of the group. We capture resources for our group so that we can continue to grow and thrive. And that's rolled out in history in a lot of different ways. In today's world, it's mostly nation states who, they want their resources, they protect themselves. However they're governed, that is the whole purpose of maintaining that nation state. Part of the uniqueness of this country is that we really have never been that, except maybe when we're at war. And even then, only kind of. So we in the United States are much more subject to other types of groupings and wanting to belong to that group, be it a religion, be it a political party, be it a football team, whatever it may be. We like to group around that, and we defend it against other. And other is anything that isn't what you've defined. So if you're using religion, it's anybody of a different religion. If you're using your state, it's anyone from another state. If it's your party, it's anyone from another political party. So it's a natural tendency to be defensive against others that aren't in your group. And we're seeing that more and more now. And part of that, I think, we are so bombarded with what authors have called the permacrisis culture. We're constantly in crisis. Somewhere something's going bad. There's wars, there's floods, there's earthquakes, there's fires, everything's going bad. We have COVID, we have another virus that's coming. We're in a constant state of crisis. And that makes you want to be in your group and safe. So I think that's the heart of it. Now, because we're social creatures, I think we want to have that connection. We want to have community. And I don't think there's a natural opposition to expanding it. It's just, how do you do that and still be safe?
Which could go back to vulnerability.
That is definitely vulnerability.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because it makes you, it's a different kind of vulnerability that I don't know if people are consciously aware of.
Which is part of why all of the ingredients in the sphere of potential, the rethreading process, need each other. That each one empowers each other, but also needs each other, because to be open, you have to be safe, feel safe. And so your community really matters. Intentionality in community matters if I'm going to be vulnerable, if I'm going to be honest about my frailties or my difficulties or my struggles. I better be around people who actually care for me and actually want the best for me, because otherwise it's not safe. Right. It's legitimately not safe. And you know, what we're trying to do is help companies become safe places, and schools and nonprofits and churches and families become safe places. And I think that word gets thrown around a lot. And I don't know that it's understood, but I mean, to be an environment where a person can be open.
I think can be vulnerable. You can be open without being vulnerable.
Well, that's why we define it as being honest and vulnerable. It's like the twofold. Yeah.
Because a lot of people are open, but they're not being honest with themselves about what really is. They're putting on a show, and they're willing to. I mean, TikTok is open, but it's a curated openness. I'm showing exactly what I want you to. I'm showing you my highlight reel. I'm not showing you what I'm really struggling with.
I think being open and honest together are important, but still that's not vulnerable. They are different, even though they're connected, because I can be honest and open and tell you what I think. That doesn't mean I'm vulnerable.
You're not vulnerable. Right.
Vulnerability requires me to listen.
Yes. Which is why we have to have both in the defining of it.
Yeah. They're very distinct yet intertwined concepts.
Right. They can't, I guess they're dependent on each other. And no one likes either, really.
I don't think any.
I don't like them.
I don't think it's that we don't like them. I think we all want them. We're afraid of them. Because there's, you know, in the big picture, you know, we talked about you got to be in a community you feel safe, or you could really be hurt. Hurts can come in lots of ways. Rejection by someone that you like or trust or felt close to really hurts. And being rejected in a larger scheme is even worse. That's why, you know, Facebook is such a powerful, or these social media things are such powerful negative influences on some people, because you are in essence shamed or embarrassed or ridiculed over a very large audience. And that is extremely painful.
And being banished. I mean, used to be how a culture would
you'd be exiled.
And that can be life-threatening. I mean, that can kill you.
Yeah. Well, it's killing people now. They just
being banished from a family or from a church. I mean, we see it with our ladies when their family walks away. I mean, it can be.
It's very painful and can very hurtful.
So how did you, when you were in Alaska in the 90s, I mean, people were scared of AIDS, HIV. No one really knew what it was. Like, how did you navigate and encourage openness? Because there's many different ways to handle a topic that people are afraid of. And how did you navigate that topic while trying to create openness for people?
Well, I think a lot of it was, by the 90s, it wasn't as unknown as it was in the early 80s. You know, by then we knew how to do the test. We were pretty clear about how AIDS was transmitted and what HIV was. So it was, we approached it much more as a public health issue, right? These are the things, if, you know, people around you may have AIDS. You may or may not know if they're HIV positive. Here's what health protocols would work, right? That's what was so disturbing in the COVID epidemic, that there was such pushback against standard things, masks, because it's an inhalable disease. So that's when you develop the universal protocols for healthcare. So if you're going to be encountered in blood, you have gloves. You don't share needles. So we started a needle exchange, even though it wasn't legal. We did it anyway, because the health concerns are where we approached it from. If you were going to have sex, have protected sex. There was ways to do that. You're not going to go out and tell people not to have sex. It just is. And it wasn't a morality police. This is wrong or this is right. It's keep yourself safe. There are ways to do that. Abstinence, of course, is one. Condoms, dental dams. There's lots of sex you can have that doesn't involve the exchange of bodily fluids. So those are the kind of things that we approached that with. Now, the hard part is that, especially when you're dealing with HIV and things that are sex, our culture doesn't even like to use the words, right? So, how do you talk about body parts and intercourse and things that are very physical, very real, and very natural, in ways that people just aren't completely turned off. Adults aren't completely turned off. Mm-hmm. So that was always a challenge. Not saying we always got it right. But that's how we approached it. It's a public health issue.
It's kind of like what is.
What is. I mean, yeah. I mean, he almost said the words, because that's openness, to be able to say, okay, there are people with opinions, and then there's a morality piece here that people have that they're dealing with. But what is we have a medical issue, and there's ways to deal with the medical issue. Right. And we can try and deal with all this other stuff, but let's just fix this.
Well, I think it's a little more than that. I think it's the recognition that everybody is going to have to take that in their context. For people who are very heavily religious, they're going to choose a way that fits their ethics, their morality. And this is where I probably differ with some of my dear friends who are more conservative. I think it's okay for them to do it that way. What I don't think is okay is for them to try and make other people do it that way. Everybody has to find their path that fits their experience of the world, their view of the world, and their personal value system. You can't easily impose those on other people. Right. They have their own world in which they live. So I think that's the part that we miss. And sometimes it's out of a pure place of love. I mean, parents do this all the time. They control their children and impose their systems on them when they're young, because they don't have theirs. They don't have the knowledge. They haven't had the experience. But when you transport that to another adult, it becomes very problematic.
What has shaped you in your life that has kind of softened this and created this openness? Because it's almost like you can look at, what I hear you saying is that you can understand sometimes why people are closed and trying to push this on you. Mm-hmm. You can understand it now, which mm-hmm. is even a state of openness, I think.
It's an evolution. And I think everyone goes through some growing of understanding, the more the experience. I think for me, the biggest thing, and this is probably why I love travel so much, when you travel and experience other places, other people, other cultures, who, great cultures, wonderful people, they think nothing like you. They don't see the world your way, and they're doing just fine. And they have loving communities and wonderful, people around them. You start to think, well, okay, so maybe my way's not the only way. And I think that's it's at base, and this is why my passion is education. It's education. The more you can experience things other than yourself and see it through the eyes of others, whether it be a difficult topic that you don't like or makes you feel uncomfortable, or something you think's really familiar and they just see it differently. Those kinds of experiences, if you are, I think there's an initial openness that has to be there. You have to be willing to hear that and not discount it instantly because it doesn't match. And I don't know where that comes from, probably from my parents. It's probably something that started very early in my life. I think you start to see that, wow, okay, there's a lot of ways of seeing this. The other thing that happens with, at least for me, experience and age is that I accept that I see the world my way. It is my experience. It may not be yours. You may not like it. You may think it's horrible. You may think I'm a bad person, but I am who I am. And I like me. That means I can like other people who they are. So I think it has to start with yourself.
And you've done a lot of studies. So is there also a part of you that's just, instead of immediately being revolted by something that's different, there's that's interesting. And so you have a natural inquisitiveness that maybe has helped you.
I think that, I'm naturally curious and a little less than risk adverse. So, and part of that I think was, growing up as who I was, you learn sometimes the world isn't safe and you have an option to do nothing or to sally forth anyway. So, sailing in the open ocean is dangerous, but that's what boats were meant to do.
Yeah, because I feel like your experience of growing up and being who you are could have gone so many different ways. Like I have people who sometimes are viewed as different can end up kind of like resentful of the world,
Oh, I've been
a little
there.
bit bitter. Yeah, I have too. That's what I was like. So, do you have any experiences that you can share, like stories that softened the bitterness?
Oh, definitely. I think there's a couple of them. So the first one was probably when I was in college. I went to a Catholic school, very conservative. So we had this thing called senior bar, which was an old house, and it was a center hall colonial kind of house. So the stairs came up, and then there was a landing with a big window, and then the rest of the stairs went up. And I was sitting in that window with another trumpet player. I was in the band. I was a geek.
You also play an instrument? I don't know why. I shouldn't be surprised. How many instruments do you play?
Not now. I haven't played trumpet or guitar in a very long time.
But trumpet and guitar, I knew. There's probably, what about
Are you
piano?
also a painter and a sculptor and
painter?
You build houses
I knew it.
Well, it depends on, I don't define myself as a painter. I like to paint and have done it. And when I was younger, actually won a ribbon at a state fair.
It's no big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing like that. Trust me. I am not that talented.
Leonardo DeMarc.
I would rather be Michael Tumeo.
Oh, okay. Well, then that's what you'll be.
I remember, so my whole life I've gotten in trouble because I'm like, I forget things. I'm disorganized. It's just, I guess it's just part of my DNA. I don't know. But I was an intern at a church for the summer with my youth director, who I'd known since I was 12. And I was in charge of like the summer trip. And I had taken the spreadsheet and like, I don't know how I did it, but basically demolished it. They had a system and I tried to follow the system and I just ended up destroying it. And I did not want to tell Steve, my youth director. He was my youth director. I was his intern. So I like sheepishly, I was like, sat him down and was like, Steve, I messed up the spreadsheet. And he looks at me and he's like, well, I figured you probably would. He's like, it's not your strength. And he's like, why didn't you just ask for help? And I was like, I don't know why I didn't ask for help. And I was like, how do you know that about me? So it's kind of like he already knew it about me and still accepted me. Totally different situation, but like to be known and loved despite my, or just not even, it's because of who I am.
Right. Yeah. I don't think it's any one characteristic or any one thing. I think the fact that someone knows what you think is the worst or one of the worst things about you, or the mistakes or the errors, the imperfections, whether they be emotional, physical, mental, moral, whatever they are, and still loves you, still accepts you. That is an extremely powerful thing. And people who do that are the real heroes.
Yeah. They're the real leaders.
That's exactly correct. Because they will bring out the best in you.
But that's why you have to have openness, because that vulnerability gives the other person the chance to be a hero in your life and expands your sphere. Because I was vulnerable, I was real about what I thought was the worst thing. Then suddenly my community comes in and goes, okay. And suddenly all that fear is gone. The trust is built and my potential is expanded because this person next to me has given me permission to be me.
Yeah. I think
without shame and blame.
I think it doesn't necessarily require, the first step doesn't need to be you. It's the other person who is observant, insightful, and says, this is what I see, and that's okay. That then gives you the chance to. Now, for some people, they'll never admit it, so they don't see themselves, they're not open with or honest with themselves. You have to be able to do that. But even being open and honest with yourself doesn't mean that you're willing to be vulnerable to other people. But if someone acknowledges what they see in you, and you thought that was the most worst thing in the world, and they've said, it's not, and you're okay, that then gives you that open door to be vulnerable and to feel some self-value. It gives you worth. So they have given you a great gift. And I don't think we recognize how courageous that is of that person, because that person could have been shut down, could have been told off, you could have walked out. So it's an interesting process. And I guess one of the things I've always wanted to become is the person that opens that door for others, because it was opened for me. So I would like to open it for others. And it's risky because you could be wrong. I'm not the smartest, regardless of what you may think. I can make mistakes. And there's a certain art to being open and accepting to others without getting yourself screwed around.
It's the art of, which I'm not very good at, but the art of sitting in the tension, like being at total opposite ends at someone, seeing them, and you still don't have to agree with them, but then still being in a relationship and being able to hold that all, I think, is to have your sphere expanded, is to hold all of that instead of immediately when you disagree to collapse. You don't hold anything besides the anger and the bitterness.
Or the fear.
Yeah. I know I'm thinking of my friends who are my dear friends and conservative, more on the conservative end of Christianity, and their daughter came out, and watching the family, they're a very close family, like very tight family, and watching them navigate this all together and how they waded through the tension and had all the conversations and have navigated this together, like in a way that I've never really witnessed before, like with kindness and long conversations and multiple conversations through it. And they've maintained this beautiful relationship that is still fully intact and still holding what they believe. I mean, it is beautiful. I don't think me and my family really covering that much like that. So I love it when I get to watch examples of people holding tension well. Yeah.
I don't think we get to see it that often.
We don't. I don't think.
Now,
I
maybe
think
it's just
right.
we're not looking for it because, I mean, our media is set up to find the bad. Our
It's
social
true.
structure is set up to find the bad. So maybe it really is happening a lot and we just don't see it. But I don't think we get to see that often. We see people ready to fight.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's out there, but we don't see it.
It's not highlighted. It's not valued. I don't know if it's valued in our, is it valued in our culture to be the one that instead of you're the fighter fighting for your side, you're the one that can hold the tension and talk through it and find solutions?
Well, the premise of that statement is that there is a culture in this country. And that goes back to that original discussion of nation state and stuff. We are so diverse, which makes us much stronger, but it also means that values are not held in common. And so there are cultures that kind of behavior is highly valued, and there are others in which it's not. So which ones do we see? And I think that goes to what you said about the news media. The news media needs to be sensational. They need to see conflict. Movies need conflict. Good stories need conflict. You always have to have a protagonist. So we focus on that. Not all cultures do that. And we have almost every culture imaginable in this country.
Yeah, you asked a good question. Is it valued? I mean, certainly when someone experiences it, they deeply value it because the feeling of experiencing a healer, a person who is a salve in a relationship, who just, we don't agree. And just still passionately loves. You can't not experience that and absolutely value it. I mean, the experience of that.
It's like hanging out with Lisa.
Oh, it is. I don't know how to think that through. Because I think if people ever got to see it, they would value it. They would put a higher value on it and they would strive for it more. But I don't know if people just don't know how.
It's probably not something that's, well, first of all, it's not easy. And I don't think we give, maybe this is another part of, respecting the differences. I don't think we give people who don't agree with us, A, enough credit for having thought it through, or B, recognize we are all so busy. We're so stressed. There's so much stuff going on that some of these larger questions, and we're talking about deep kinds of concepts of openness and vulnerability and relationship, who really has time to think about it, right? I got to get up in the morning. I got to go to work. I got to make sure there's food on the table. I got to pay my bills. I got friends. Maybe we're going to have a party. I've got a birthday coming up. I got an anniversary coming up. My parents needs attention. If day-to-day life doesn't leave much room in our current state to think about these things. That's why people are always listening to podcasts or trying to go to a movie to see stuff. They want something they know that they're not getting, but who has the time?
This is why time is in the rethreaded process.
It has to be.
Because it takes time. If you don't invest in it.
If you don't intentionally use your time, there won't be enough of it.
Well,
that's
and
brilliant.
I think there is some, and I find this hopeful. It was a positive outcome of the COVID epidemic where we were forced into solitude. People, you hear a lot more about, you need to take time for yourself. You need to think about your mental health. Think about how you're feeling. All those things that before were there, but we never really talked about because we were busy, doing. All of a sudden that was all shut down and you had to spend time with yourself. And it was scary and depressing and a whole bunch of other things. But finding that new balance point, even work-life balance in this country is shifting, and how we do work and what it means to us. Is it a career? Is it a job? Is it just making money? Is it something meaningful? Those things are all up in the air again, which I think is very good. But that also leads to some of the divisions we see, because if you've been in the world a long time and things were working this way and you had a vision of what was supposed to be right and how the world was supposed to be, and people did this if you were X and people did this if you were Y, and everything was nice and calm, and the rug's been pulled out from underneath you, you are scared to death. Your future's uncertain. You don't know what's going on. You don't know how to interact, and you're going to become defensive. And that's where we are in a lot of places. So within that wonderful opportunity, a natural side effect is a good deal of defensiveness and entrenchment. It's just part of being human.
I talked about that one time, is that my philosophy, my thought behind it is sometimes when your purpose gets ripped out from under you, then there is this huge need to prove yourself, and which leads to a lot of defensiveness.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are not grounded in your purpose, or your purpose gets, what you perceive as your purpose gets swept away.
Or how you've defined yourself.
Or how you've defined yourself.
Whether it be a job or a relationship or whatever it is, when you suddenly lose that, there's a whole bunch of things. First of all, you have a grief process. You have suffered a loss, and there's grief. And grief is painful. And then there's all this uncertainty in who are you and what are you supposed to be doing? And that's very scary and can make you extremely defensive and in some ways aggressive, because you have to prove yourself again. You have to find it again. And anyone who kind of counters that is an enemy. I mean, viscerally. And so those kind of things are very difficult.
Which means the person on your team becomes your enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens to me a lot because of my insecurity. The person next to me on my team can easily become my enemy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I know people. So when I lived in India for 5.5 years. It was some of the hardest times of my life, but people would be like, yeah, but you're over there and you're doing this work. And some of the hardest things were like the interpersonal conflict of our team, which everyone was surprised, because they're just like, but you're there and you have this like purpose, and you're just like, every day, why does anything else matter? And I was like, because there's this person next to me and we're working together. And yeah, we had to work it out. I mean, the purpose was greater than just being over there working with women and trafficking. And we were in relationship with each other. Struggling with my point on that one.
A lot of it is,
but it's this perception. Yeah.
Yeah. And if I think back on, there's all kinds of stories and things that you either read or see or experience. Part of this is about control. When you're in a team, and if you haven't sat down, and it's impossible to come to complete consensus. There's always going to be differences of perception and approach, and so then that's a natural bed for some level of conflict.
Yeah.
And then depending on the individual's ability to deal with conflict, that can go a whole bunch of different ways, and not all of them are good. And I think that's part of it. There's so many things in there.
I know.
But that's what makes, that's the evolution. That's it. Some of it you just go with and feel, you learn the lesson and you move on. If you have time to go back and think about it and reflect, you may be able to suss out the details a little bit more. But, you asked me some time ago about how did I get to where I am? Because I'm opinionated. Shock. And a lot of it is just having been through things like that. Having done stupid things and, paid the price for it. And those are always hard, but that makes me who I am, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all combined. So, sometimes It's a wonderful exercise, A, if you have time, and B, can extract some value. But sometimes it's not worth the pondering. Learn the lesson, incorporate it, and move on.
Well,
Because there's a whole bunch more to learn.
and this is the point. This is that when you do have conflict, you do have hard things in your life. At least my reaction always usually first is blame and shame. Like it's all my fault or it's someone else's fault. But I think the sooner that you can, it is what is, and deal with it and take the lesson and learn it and integrate it and move out of blame and shame.
Yeah, because sometimes it is your fault.
It is your fault.
You know?
Yeah, it's totally your fault.
Yeah, as I've, the last person who claimed to be perfect, we all know what happened to him. So, it's not something that, yeah. And probably, I would say in most relationships, 50% of the time, if there's a problem, it's my fault. And sometimes it's the other person's fault. And sometimes there's no fault. It just is.
It just is.
And
we talk about this a lot too. We waste our time blaming instead of fixing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that, I think, from a personal perspective, the shame is the part that is bad. Being guilty of something is a fact, at least in my reality. Being ashamed of it is taking guilt to a different level. Mm-hmm. I can be embarrassed. Believe me, I have felt shame. But you have to get by. That's an unhealthy response to a mistake or an error or a misstep or, a complete screw up. But at some point you have to get beyond shame. You have to accept responsibility. You mm-hmm. have to not blame others. If it was your fault, it was your fault. Other people may have reacted to it in a way that was not the best way, but ultimately you're the person who did whatever you did or said whatever you said or acted in whatever way you acted that was not the best one. Mm. And the other thing about that is, sometimes you do your best and you're still guilty, but what can you do? I mean, if you live in the past, you die in the present.
But I think that's the thing is yes, you're staying open to what is without carrying the emotional baggage along with you. I need to make amends. I need to do these things to correct my behavior. I need whatever. That's ownership.
Yeah, I think that's it. And what people want, I know I certainly want it, is for the guilt to go away, but that doesn't. You did what you did, and there it is. But using it to move forward in a positive direction mm-hmm. doesn't make guilt a bad thing.
So how did you do that?
A lot of counseling.
Oh, okay.
I know, but how did you initially make the first movement towards away from shame and towards ownership? Because I know your story and I know I've watched people navigate similar situations and it will eat them and they will choose a different way.
Mm-hmm. I think it in my situation was having people around me once again who knew the story, knew that I had done something wrong, but didn't abandon me. Mm. And that allowed me to, because shame is the concept that other people know, and it's so horrid that it just eats you alive. Mm-hmm. Well, everybody knew, and nobody, at least in my circle of my community, rejected me. Mm. So that meant, okay, yeah, I was wrong. It was bad. And I hurt people. But okay, now I just move on from that. I accept that. I make amends. I apologize. There were reasons I acted that way that I needed to explore and understand, because a lot of it was just automatic, ingrained from long time history, trauma, bad events. Mm-hmm. And the survival mechanisms I developed when I was a kid were not ones that were appropriate or adequate in the world I lived in now. So I had to relearn those things, and that you need help with. So counseling and some work, learning new things. That's hard. And accepting that you were wrong, and that's hard. It's always hard to apologize. There's a song like that, right? Sorry seems to be the hardest word. So yeah, that's how I did it.
So is it fair to say that it was love that started your process?
I think that would be absolutely correct.
Mm-hmm.
And it came from outside of you.
Yes.
So it kind of goes back to what you were saying a
Yeah.
little while ago. Sometimes it's the hero outside of me that
Mhm.
gives me the strength.
I think it was love and respect.
Mm.
You know, you don't, I think one of the most meaningful, impactful things that was said to me was, just because you did something bad doesn't erase all the good things you've done in the past. And that realization alone is very helpful. That you are not the bad thing you did. You are the sum of your life. And there are good things and bad things, and you've had positive impacts. And yeah, you've screwed some things up and you've hurt people. But the sum of your life in balance, I was a good person and still am, even though I did a bad thing.
Because you did the work to know why you did, and you changed.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's like any addiction. Addiction is hard to break. There's a lot of biochemical and psychological parts to it. And it takes work. And it takes constant work.
Yeah, it's annoying.
No, it's not always courage. Sometimes it's fear of the opposite of the path that you would be on if you didn't change. You know, that's why they say in a lot of addictions, you have to hit rock bottom. You have to realize the price you're paying and will continue to pay if you don't change.
I know I've been defining courage as the ability to choose the long-term outcome over the immediate.
I don't know if that's courage. That sounds more like wisdom.
I don't know if that's courage, but that's how I've been saying it.
Takes courage to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. I think courage is it's the ability to see those paths and choose the one that's not only feels the best to you, but is the best for others. Because sometimes it's harder to do what's better for others than it is to do what's best for you. And I think that's what takes courage. And it involves risk.
I think most people default to shame. Did you have to work through that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I think somebody hearing might go, oh, okay, well, you know, a person says you're okay. And
I was brought up Catholic. My background is Jewish. The Jews invented guilt. The Catholics perfected it. I know shame very well.
But because I knew you before, and I just remember you telling me at some point, or you told the class, I believe, like, you have no idea how much it meant to me that I got to be your king.
Oh, God, that was the most amazing feeling. And I cried for a long time after that. Because it was indicia of acceptance of a group of people that were so much better and important and knowledgeable and experienced than I. And to be not only accepted in that group, but honored in that way was something I had never, ever experienced. And not for something I did, but for who I was, for me and my personality. That's what that meant to me. And I've earned awards because I, did great research or published a great paper, or, I've earned all kinds of awards for things I did, but not a recognition of who I am. And that's what that was. It just was amazingly powerful. And probably one of the highest honors I've ever received.
That's awesome. I hope the class of 16 listens to this.
I hope they do too. They're wonderful people.
Mm-hmm. We did have a good class.
Without a doubt. Still do.
Yeah.
What have you learned through the process that somebody listening that's in the middle of it that you would say, here, man, you're going to be okay. Here's your first step.
Well, that's hard because being in the middle of it, you're not going to hear things. It's hard, that not to roll up in a ball and want to die. And that crossed my mind several times. That's just the way it is. My counselor told me once that I would get to the point where I thought it was the best thing that happened to me. Still not there, but it was not a bad thing. It was something I did that was bad, but the result has been a lot of growth, much closer relationship with my partner, a much better understanding of myself, and a better path on learning how to handle stress and behaviors. So it was a good thing. The specific circumstance was ugly, but it turned out I'm on the other side of it. There's no guarantee that that's true for anybody in the middle of it. I was fortunate enough to have people around me who supported me through it. I was fortunate enough to have the ability to get counseling. I was fortunate enough to have a safe place to be while I went through it. Those things were all available to me that may not be available to others going through it, and that all affects the outcome. But I think the first thing is you have to believe that you'll get through it. That's the hardest part. That's really the hardest part.
Yeah,
Vision.
And this is why it is a rethreading story. Like, it is taking your pain and turning it into your potential, because you are better because of it.
Yes, I would say yes.
Yeah. And my hunch is there is so much more internal freedom, like internally inside you now, that there is space and you get to hold a whole bunch more love, and joy and goodness.
I can. Yeah, I can, because I don't have this other thing eating part of me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I get so hopeful when I hear your story, because that's what I want for people to experience. That on the other side, there is more.
You're your potential growth.
It's your potential growth, but there is no way around it. You got to
have to go through it.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely. I would not be who I am if the sum of everything, both the good and the bad.
Yeah.
And you can't just check the boxes. You got to take the time. The process actually matters.
Oh yeah, it is a process. It's not an event. It's a process.
Messy. I mean, sitting here listening to all these people, because this is what we've been interviewing people on, so it makes me very reflective of my own life. And like, I grabbed some courage this past week and I went home with my family, and I just had a great vulnerable conversation with one of my family members. And it was so good. And so created some space inside my heart. But it's from listening to all these people sharing me these stories and wanting more of that. Like, I want more of that in my life. I want my heart to expand. I want to do more. I want to love better. So I grabbed some courage and did it, and it was so scary, and it worked out well.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I think that's probably the encouragement I want people to hear when they're listening to this episode is, like, if there is something, what did you just say? That was eating you.
Yeah.
That's eating your heart. Like, if there is something in your life, go and deal with it, because it might get worse, and there will be a cost, but it will eventually. There is freedom from it. There is freedom.
Yes. Without a doubt.
Yeah. Sorry, I got all passionate about that.
Nothing wrong with passion.
You have any more questions?
No, I'm just struggling with that.
What are you struggling with?
That it might not get better. I might have misheard your words, but that's resonating with me of
nothing. It's not guaranteed to get better. And we can, I'm sure you know people, I know people, we see it every day, people who go through hard times and it doesn't get better for them. And the consequences are very bad for them and for others. It takes work. The potential is always there, but there's no certainty. There's no certainty in life. And that's, I think, because we're so afraid of failure, we're so afraid that things are never going to get better, we give up. So the key is not to give up, but that doesn't guarantee it's going to get better. I think it increases the probability. It gives you the opportunity, but I believe it'd be naive to think that it's always going to work.
And when you say get better, what do you mean? Or work?
Well, so let's consider an addiction. You can do the work to get out of the addiction, but there may be there's all kinds of potential consequences. There could have been damage that you did to yourself that is irreparable, and that's not going to get better. You could relapse. Relapses happen all the time, and or you don't really get to the root of the problem, or the root of the problem is so serious you can't really get around it. Those are all potentials. That doesn't mean the person is bad, or it doesn't mean they're going to have a horrible life, but they may not be able to reach that full potential. And you never know when the full potential is reached if you even get through it. I still have lots to learn and go through and deal with. So I think there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of potential, and you're absolutely correct. Things, if you work it through, you're going to get to the other side. But to always think the other side's going to be that much fantastic better, I think would be Pollyannish. Sad to say. I'm one of the lucky ones. That's how I perceive it.
We've been having this conversation on this podcast, is that I think through these conversations, it's changing my idea of what justice is. Because I've been like, justice, like human trafficking is wrong, blah, 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 blah. And what am I trying to say is that I think maybe true justice is giving someone space and what they need to heal.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to like this crusade of right. It's a community where people are safe and they have time to think and they can rediscover their purpose. Because you said it's almost like a luxury.
Mm-hmm.
And you were able to do all this.
And maybe justice is the ability to respond. Maybe justice is I get to own what the next chapter is.
Yeah.
That chapter happened and it was what it was. But justice is I get to own my what's next.
I think justice is giving individuals the opportunity to own it.
Mm-hmm.
Their ownership is their personal decision. But it is just and fair to give everybody the opportunity, to give them a path that they can change if they wish. That to me is justice. That doesn't mean there may not be punishment. It doesn't mean there's consequences, but justice is the opportunity to change if you want to. That to me, that's what justice is.
In an environment that has what you need.
Well, yeah. I don't think you have an opportunity if you don't have the environment with what you need. So yes,
yeah,
it's all wrapped up to me in the word.
Because I'm trying to think of like when I think about our justice system,
which is not a justice system.
No.
That's a punishment system.
I wish we would call it that, the punishment system.
Well, there's two parts. I mean, and this is now I'm going to put on my lawyer hat.
Put it on. I'll come with my nonprofit hat.
Part of a justice system is determining guilt and innocence. And that has to be done justly, meaning fairly and honestly with evidence. That to me is an important part of justice. So, there's justice in our system involves culpability. because people do things wrong.
Right.
Right. First of all, you have to determine, did they act in a way that is truly wrong? Or, this goes back to Les Miserables, right? Do you put a person in jail because they stole bread so they didn't starve to death? That's not just. So you have to think about culpability and, those kinds of things in a justice system. Once the decision that you are culpable is done, then to me, justice requires, yes, some punishment, if appropriate, inappropriate to the crime, but also the opportunity to change. And unfortunately, in our system, I think we're moderately good at, you did it, you're culpable, you're not. Yeah. But we're unfortunately way too good in the punishment part. We haven't got that opportunity to change part. And I think that would make the justice system a justice system as opposed to a guilt and punishment system.
I'm not sure that we get it too good on the other side either, that the victim is able to be properly made whole.
Well,
I think in when we talk about justice for the ladies, is that they get their life back because their life was stolen from them. They get their life back. And so there's the perpetrator side of the equation, but then there's the victim side of the equation. And what does justice mean for them? It's not punishment on the other person doesn't help the victim.
Sometimes it does.
Yeah.
People want, there's lots of victims you can talk to who want what they call justice, and what they mean is revenge.
Or vengeance.
Or vengeance, yeah. So, I think that other side of the equation is more difficult for a system to really take care of, because that becomes, you move out of legal processes, which our system is based on, into the social service side. And so that's where I think the nonprofit has to step up. And in reality, for most of the most serious crimes or faults in the world, you can't make the victim whole again. It's just,
right.
That's where you need community sympathy and support. That's where community and openness and understanding and all of those things come in. Now you get some of that fixed in our civil system when you can, if the damages can be monetized, then it's repairable in our system. But there are very few things beyond that you can repair. You can't return people to their full health. You can't return loved ones. You can't, they have to work to get their lives back, and they have to have opportunities to do that. But that's a social nonprofit construct. That's not a judicial construct.
And that's what that's
the difference in our language is we're not talking about judicial justice. We're talking about
justice
as a philosophy.
Yeah.
Because we've been having this conversation about that our women are left with something that happened to them. It's not their fault.
Right.
And they're left to carry it.
Right.
Which is,
it's not their fault, but it becomes their responsibility.
Yes. It's not their fault and it becomes their responsibility.
That's exactly correct.
Yeah. And that's what what crime does.
But the moment they own it, the moment they own it, justice is being done in their heart because they now own their life back. That the healing is providing the justice that we cannot give them, or a judicial system cannot give them.
No, there's not a system that can do that. That would be what I would define, forgive my legal training, as a judicial system.
Correct.
I think that giving them the right to speak, to explain to the judge the impacts, and having that go into the price that the perpetrator has to pay is part of justice. Because the same crime for different people have much different impacts. But ultimately making the victim whole again that's so far beyond a judicial system.
Do you remember Justice Day? at Leadership Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm.
They brought in this, it was I loved this idea of restorative justice. And they had a father come in, and he told the story about how his son was 14, and his son was shot by a 14-year-old and killed. And this father ended up going to this other 14-year-old that shot his son, sitting down with him and talking to him, heard this young man's story, forgave him, and essentially adopted the 14-year-old that killed his son. And now they go on tour together and talk about restorative justice. Because the idea that this 14-year-old would have lost his life his life would have been destroyed too, if he would have not had this father come and show him grace and show him mercy. And the cycle was broken because of restorative justice.
And that victim was made whole by his actions.
By his actions.
No system fixed that.
Correct.
But the system did give him that opportunity.
Yeah. And that's probably why it's the opportunity to sit at the table and listen to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But that's so deeply personal by each victim and each situation and each person. Mm-hmm. Just like it's difficult for each person has to make the decision to be open and be vulnerable. And people make these decisions all the time. Mm-hmm. And what's the most difficult thing, I think, having run a nonprofit and for you, is to see people who make a different decision. Because in your heart of hearts, you feel that's wrong. And it'd be so much better if they did X versus Y. We have to always be aware that to force them to a different way is just as damaging as letting them make the wrong decision.
Well, I agree. Forcing, I do believe, though, that if a person chooses blame and shame, if the person chooses vengeance, they are hurting themselves.
Oh, without a doubt.
And so they are limiting their potential. So in the context of what we're talking about, for them to maximize their potential, at some point through healing or through community that strengthens them or something, they get to a place where they can lay that down.
Yeah, they have to have the opportunity. I think this is the engineer in me coming out. The concepts that we're discussing, the philosophies, the hopes, the dreams, the ideas, I think are wonderful. And I think everybody would agree. Most people would agree, at least. The problem is how. How do we as people help other people get there? And that's, this is where things like Rethreaded are so needed, because you're providing those opportunities. But it's also painful because there are people who won't take it. There are people who won't get the opportunity. Mm. And that's hard. And that hurts, especially if you're very passionate about providing it. The same way I'm passionate about education, and I see people who, come to classes not ready, don't want to be ready, and they're missing so much, and they're missing great opportunities. But, there's only so much anyone, even any organization, can do. And because we get so passionate, we sometimes walk across the line from giving opportunity, giving encouragement, giving all the things that can help people make their own decision, and we try and make the decision for them. I think that's the line that we can't cross.
Did someone try to do that to you when you were healing?
No, I was very fortunate. Once again, I was one of the lucky ones. The opportunity was given freely and with love. And I was lucky enough to choose the right path. Because I think some of it is luck. I mean, people may think, oh, you're so strong, you're so courageous, you're so smart. Maybe. I'm persistent, and sometimes I'm pretty lucky.
I know we've been trying to start this at Rethreaded for like 2 months, listening circles, where I'm going to sit down and listen to our women's experience operating in systems. And then I've been meeting with some people working in the systems and just listening. But I'm trying to, can I bring change from a different place where I can hold both views and then listen to both sides? They can listen to each other. And then is there a way to together, even though we have different viewpoints, we can come together and decide that together we can do these things differently and bring change that way, instead of walking in like I normally think I would, believing I'm right and you need to change, but listening and together openly, let's try to see what we can do together.
That's, to me, that's
different for me too.
I don't think you give yourself enough credit.
I don't know. Jason has worked with me for 8 years.
I mean, she comes in telling you what to do, but she also holds things with open hands. So
Right.
she because she's so forward, she's able to allow other people to be incredibly forward. So it's
Yeah,
she's different. She's different in that way, where it's not it's not demanding that we have to do it this way, but she's really blunt about, I think we should do it this way.
Yeah.
But yet she can somehow hear another person be just as blunt, and so it's different.
I think that a large portion of all of that is style. And the key is recognizing that different styles, everyone has their own style, but styles are a tool in the toolbox. And depending on the audience, the class, the individual, the situation, different styles will bring one to different results. And it's the conscious selection of approach, given the situation, that will help you get to the best outcome.
Intentionality.
And mindfulness. Being mindful of knowing yourself, knowing what your natural style is, being attentive and mindful of other people in the room and what they are feeling, thinking, coming from, and then choosing those approaches, styles, words to match that situation. And that's very hard if the situation requires something outside your natural style or your natural tendencies. It just requires a little more intentionality. But I think that's the hallmark of a great leader.
And the stretch.
And being willing to recognize that, being willing to say, okay, my natural approach to this might not be the best one. So let's try something different.
It's also why I love having a team.
Oh, that's the hallmark of a good team, is when everybody can do that together. You'll usually get to the best result then.
All right. Do you have a full circle moment where you've went through something hard, did all this work internally, externally, and then you had this moment where it kind of all came together and you were just able to hold an experience, like a full circle moment?
I can imagine I have, but at this moment, I can't pick one. Does that make sense?
I need you to, because we can end the podcast.
You may have a problem. That was a rather forceful statement.
It's my style.
Yeah, and it works with me. Unfortunately, I can give it right back. I think it was said earlier that the full circle moment for me is probably where I'm at right now, that I'm doing my engineering. I'm, in a company doing good engineering, things that are kind of new and exciting, saving people's lives. And I'm teaching again. And in an environment that is so much less political and much more focused on real education than what we now have in public universities. So, I think that would be that probably meets that definition pretty well. Because now I understand universities, I understand engineering, I understand teaching, I understand all these things. In fact, I'm teaching a people management course talking about leadership and how to be inspirational and how to deal with different people to my cohort. We broke it up. This was my design. We broke up. We have about 150 to 180 leaders, people managers in the company. They all are mandated to take this course. And so I divided it up with peer instructors, other people managers that were selected by HR, and they teach a cohort of 20 or so people. We have 4 modules of 4 sessions each, so it's 16 hours of training. And the HR selected, for me, my cohort is the CEO, the CFO, the CIO, health and safety officer, and all of the managing directors of the company. So I'm teaching the C-suite about people management and leadership. And a lot of it is just what we've been talking about, being attentive to other people, listening, building an inspiring vision of what the future can look like as a team, and working to get people to grow in the process of getting there. So, yeah, this is a real full circle moment.
Yeah, I think so. Because some of the things that you talked about through the hardship was people loving.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's embedded in this leadership that you're teaching. So, yeah.
Yeah. And perhaps more than loving, caring.
Mm.
You know, you can not like people, but you can still care about them. And I think that goes to the, people have different views, and I may not like your view very much. But I still care about you because you're a person. And, beneath that crusty exterior with a complete lack of understanding of reality, there's still a person.
Yeah. I see you.
Yeah.
And you're still okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's incredible.
All right. Any last parting words, Mark?
This is a great podcast. Keep it up. People need to hear this kind of stuff from all different perspectives. Like I said, travel, you asked me how I got to where I was. It's by hearing these kind of things and hearing different perspectives, ones that I never thought of or ones that I disagreed with, but were presented thoughtfully. Like, wow, gives you pause. It makes you take time. All of those components you're talking about. So these kinds of opportunities for people. Because the nice thing is you could listen to this while you're driving somewhere. So it doesn't have to be intensive.
Right. We can make good use of your driving time. Be
there
intentional.
You go. Yeah.
Any last thoughts, Immune?
Oh, thank you, Mark.
Yeah. Thank you for being here.
It was my honor. Thank you for the invitation.
All right. Make sure you subscribe on to our podcast and
click the bell. What is all that stuff you're supposed to do?
Subscribe.
Come on, Mark. Subscribe.
Oh, you can find us wherever you find podcasts listed.
Don't forget to follow and like you on Facebook and TikTok and all those other things.
Please tell your friends about the podcast. Invite them.
Leave a review.
Send us ideas.
Follow our channel.
There you go.
Send us questions.
Yeah, if you have any questions.
If you have questions, we'd love to hear them.
Okay.